Hello to viewers, welcome to my channel Science to Technology. In today's show, Camera Tuesday, we're going to talk about Sony A9 Mark III announcement. So let's dive deep into it. So what exactly we are talking about here? We are talking about a flagship refresh because Sony has a flagship that is A1 and they also have sub flagships which are A9, S3 and R series. So these are generally flagship, meaning these are not cheap cameras. So these is flagship and it's a refresh. So basically the camera we are talking about basically is the third iteration of A9 design. Now the target price is around $6,000. So expensive puppy, and in India it should be translating to around 5 lakh rupees. I'm reasonably sure it will cross that, and the availability should be in around March 2024. Depending on the nation, depending on your state, you should be able to get it earlier or later, but by March 2024 it should be a common thing. Now why Sony is releasing it now, and especially with this sort of weird hype where rather than releasing the camera and announcing it, they are like, hey, they made a surprise event. Well, they are targeting Paris 2024 Olympics. This is a purpose-built camera for sports photography. What is the biggest sports venue? Olympics. So perfectly timed for that. Now, why this is a big deal? Why you're seeing so much hype around it? Well, this is the first mirrorless full frame camera that has global shutter. Now, global shutter is ancient technology. We used to have global shutter before we had rolling shutter because we used to use CCD, charge coupled device. So that puppy always had global shutter. However, then we jumped to CMOS. CMOS has better low light sensitivity, but everything is awesome about CMOS except the rolling shutter. Basically, it always works like this. So you have a row and column and you read one by one. So one line by one line. So you always have a structure going from top to down. So that is a problem. So that's why even though you have electronic shutter, it always requires a mechanical shutter. Otherwise, at fast shutter speed, you will see a lot of banding. If you're moving it fast, especially in video, you will see a lot of jello effects and all that jazz. So we always wanted global shutter, but this camera became the first one to make it mainstream, so to say. Are there other cameras like, yes, there is Red Komodo that has made it kind of very popular, specifically speaking for Red. It's a Red Komodo is very successful, and again, global shutter, that's why it's so successful. This puppy is bringing that to full frame, and all camera wants it. Let that be very clear. Every camera company, be it Nikon, be it Fuji, be it Sony, be it whatever have you, every camera company wants this global shutter technology. Then question becomes, if it's we had it before, why didn't we use it? Well, the penalty is this. So whenever you are looking at this design, basically rolling shutter, you have a photodiode and you have a X and Y wiring system, wires. So you always figure out A, B, okay, now you read this part. So what's happening here? You are having photons falling onto it and creating charge. Charge is getting converted to voltage using some circuitry. That circuitry happens here. Now, back in the old days, circuitry used to happen on top of it. You're like, wait a minute, the sensor is below the wiring. Yes, that's what we call front side illuminated. So if you paid attention to last 8-9 years ago and everybody was talking about backside illuminated, backside, somebody figured out how to engineer this. So this wiring is behind the photodiode part. Now that the sensor part. So what does allows a CMOS to behave like a global shutter? Well, somebody figured it out. It's like, hey, we have charge, we need to read it. Now we cannot read it, like no matter what you do, you cannot read it all at once, like it will just not work. So what can we do? Well, somebody figured out, hey, we have a charge holder known as capacitor. So what if you put a capacitor there? So whenever you read like pixel level memory, that's what they're talking about. It's a capacitor. Now consequence of that is it's on the pixel level, meaning it's literally eating away at the active area of the pixel. So when you are etching it, like you're using lithography machine, your active photo site, basically where photons are getting converted into voltage, is shrinking. So even though you could have literally 12 megapixel versus 12 megapixel, you could literally have a global shutter and it would be like, yeah, it actually has worse performance, even though it can be made by same company. Sony could make both of them, and you will, because of the laws of physics, you will find this puppy to be compromised. Why? Because it is compromised. It has less surface area. So generally the two vectors which are compromised is dynamic range and image sensitivity, meaning how low light this can see. Again, bigger bucket, smaller bucket. And dynamic range is basically how much variation you can handle. Smaller bucket has poorer bucket range. So what did Sony do? Well, Sony said they have reduced the quality control penalty of it. Can this technology be good? Absolutely. These are good. Again, Red Komodo, nobody is talking about, oh, Red Komodo does not have this. Like it can be made good. It's just like nobody ever had the plunge where it's like, okay, let's just go for it. And in Sony's industrial sensor lineup, they always had global shutter, and people bought it, people used it. And if you read the catalog, there are like 14 stops of dynamic range in rolling shutter, 12 stops of dynamic range in global shutter. Now like, oh, 12 is so bad. Here's the deal. Few years ago, people were poofing each other for 12 stops of dynamic range. So we are a bit spoiled by numbers, but realistically, in real world scenarios, if you have the push where you can like, okay, I'm gonna bite the bullet, I'm gonna just like eat it, people will be more than happy to enjoy the benefits of this technology rather than bitching about, oh, it does not have the range. And it's like, trust me. So that's what Sony did. It's like, hey, we're just gonna bite the bullet, let's just go all in. So technology is not new, not unique. It's just somebody had to take that plunge where it's like, okay, let's go, let's just go all in. So Sony did that. That's why so much hype around it. So what does this give them? Like, okay, they paid so much money on the sensor, what do they gain out of it? Well, this puppy runs. And I mean runs. Now, let this be very clear. Most camera companies, they have amazing performance in their SoC, basically the X-Speed processors, the Bionics and all that jazz. They have amazing horsepower in terms of teraflops. It's amazing. So, but what these camera companies do is like, they will use the same SoC in the flagship and then block it and launch it into the crappier versions. And then they software lock it. So horsepower is there, but they software lock it. Now, what Sony realized, if they have a new sensor, which already has some compromise, and they software lock it with the SoC, yeah, people will be like, yeah, no. So Sony let SoC to be like, allow me to fly. So this puppy flies as 120 FPS. You're like, wait a minute, can't other cameras do that? Yes and no. Yes, there are many camera companies and cameras that can do 120 FPS, but most of them will go JPEG or well, no autofocus, no adjustment. This puppy can do all of that at 120 FPS. Now, like, how the heck it is that fast? Well, it can do auto. Here's the Sony already cracked it. That's why I said the SoCs are always ahead. They are just blocking it. SoCs could always do it. It's just like, if we give this function in A1, why will people buy A1 if I give the same SoC in A series Mark IV, A7 Mark IV? It's like, let's cripple it. So this is basically uncrippled performance of dual Binex processor. So it could have been done long ago. And again, most of you would have paid attention to behind the scenes calculations, behind the scenes of basically how Sony talks about it. It's like, yeah, we are already running at 120 FPS. That's the hertz. They are talking in 120 hertz. The autofocus is working at that. So now they are just exposing that part to user. It's like their SoCs were already there. It's just like, okay, let's use it. So this is just like 120. Now, there is no mechanical shutter. Now, there are other also Nikon and Canon can in some way act like that. But here's the deal. They have penalty for specifically with Nikon, because while it is fast, it's not really global shutter, meaning you cannot shutter sync at whatever speed you desire. You cannot have like a golf. Basically, slim, long sticks moving at high speeds will show rolling shutter. It has very minimal rolling shutter, but not zero. So what do we have when we do not have rolling shutter? Well, we have motion blur. So we go back into the era of basically what film used to have, basically what this puppy used to have. That motion blur starts to come back. So that's why it's desirable to have that. So what Nikon is doing, basically what Sony is doing here is like, hey, we have proper global shutter. So why do we have waste money on shutters? Shutters are expensive devices. So yeet the shutter. So all they have is a cover, which is very cheap. And so when you are doing silent shooting, you can actually do silent shooting without any penalty. So there is a genuine benefit of that, no penalty. And it can do flash sync at any speed. Now let this be very clear. Back in the old days, when we used to have cameras like this, these puppy used to have what we call leaf shutter, meaning the shutter is not a curtain, it's basically an aperture blade that is going fachong fachong. Now that puppy allowed shutter speed to work. Like this 1960s camera can easily sync shutter at 500th of a second. Like, wait a minute, how the heck this ancient camera can work at that high speed, given the fact that majority of cheap DSLRs and mirrorless only go to 1/200th of a second? Yeah, that's the whole point, is the shutter. Shutter is the weak link. So to solve this issue, Hasselblad still uses leaf shutter. Leaf shutter allows you to go very high speed, like around, in Hasselblad case, they can go up to 2000 if I'm not mistaken, 1/2000th of a second. What about this puppy? Lol. The answer is lol. Basically, it can go up to 1/80,000th of a second. Now, can you actually do it? Answer is yes and no. The camera is not the weak link. The sensor is not the weak link, nor the shutter. The flash was not designed to run at that speed. Meaning, this is the flash has been fading away from, like, public consciousness and like the usabilities and all that, because again, cameras were not really that good. It had a lot of issues and people are like, low light has becoming good enough, whereas like just go without it. So there is no flash that is actually powerful enough. Do we have electronics that can do that? Absolutely. Do we have LEDs that can glow that far? Absolutely. We just don't have flash. So do not blame Sony for this. It's not Sony's fault. Sony built a system that people were wanting. They built it. Now they're like, oh, actually flash is slower. So I do expect, if once global shutter becomes more mainstream, more common, and more people enjoy the benefits of basically flash syncing, more high speed flash will start to come rather than going pick, it like. So I do see that. Now this is not Sony's fault, it's fault of the basically lagging flash technology, so to say. It can be done, let that be very clear. I can easily see it, some engineer sitting down, it's like, okay, 80,000 a second, we're gonna show you femtosecond laser. It can be done. So that's the amazing part of it. Flash syncing, meaning anybody who wants to do flash photography, they already bought this camera. Let that be very clear. Unless they were poor, they've already bought this camera. Pre-order has been done. Shutter speed goes a bit too stupid. Is 1/80,000th of a second. Now, like, is there any point of that? Well, actually, yes. If you are in broad daylight in full frame camera with f1.2, you can still shoot at f1.2 without ND. 1/80,000th of a second, it has some benefits. So they're like, that's the whole point. Basically, they have this expensive sensor and the board is cheap. So they're like, hey, to justify its cost, let's just unlock it. So they are doing that, and it also has pre-capture, which if I'm not mistaken, this is the first time Sony is doing it, and they are doing it surprisingly well, meaning you have very fine-tuned control of that buffer. So what you do, you half press it. The moment you half press it, it starts to record. Basically exactly how high-speed camera works. You're always recording, and the moment you press the trigger, it saves few minutes before. Now here it's 1 second. So basically at maximum speed, it's 120 frames before would have been recorded. So what is the total? Total is 150 if I'm not mistaken. So if you press, like let's say this bird flew and you just clicked it. If it's below the buffer that you have set it, you would have captured the moment without any issue. Now you scroll back, you see the system and you're like, okay, good. You save the photo. Now buffer can be made smaller. You may be like, hey, 1 second is a bit much. 0.5 second. In sports, again, I can easily see a trained sports photographer would be like, hey, you know what? 0.5 is good enough. 0.5 of a second. 0.25 can also be done. But again, it's a good setting to have. For sports photography, they're like, shut up, take money. And buffer capacity is also kind of good, that this puppy can do full RAW at 150 frames. So that's good. And at low settings, it will go even higher, around 200 or 300. And it can clear all the buffer in around 11 seconds. So dumping is also quicker. So genuinely good. Like this is like, let's make it fast. Like it's not hold back. It's like 24 megapixel is like a double-edged sword. Yeah, it's 24 megapixel only, but it's 24. Let's fly. So many people who are like capturing a lot of photos and got hands on, they just used 120 as a video file. And most shocking comments are like, wait a minute, are you telling me all these clips are photos? Yeah, that's the whole point. 120 FPS. That's a high-speed camera. So this puppy is fast. Like there is no discussion about this. Like this, at this point in time, at the point of this making me this video, flat out, shut up, take money. That's how fast this is. Like if you need speed, there is nothing that can do this. And odd thing about it is, from Sony's point of view, it's like it has polish, which is shocking to me. It's like I have seen Sony's like for past 6 years. It's like they never polish their stuff. This is the first time I'm seeing like they are actually polishing it, which is like, that means this camera was under construction for at least 3 years. So what they have is they created a new battery grip. Even with the same battery, they created new battery grip. It's like, why? Well, you take any lithium ion chemistry, basically like these puppies. You may be like, okay, it has X amount of power, capacity, let's say liters. Let's say it has 100 liters of fuel. Okay, does that mean you can get 100 out of it? In certain circumstances, yes. But if you draw them faster, you will not get it. You will waste most of it as heat. So if you have the same cell, basically cell A and cell B, same capacity, and if you are drawing power across them, so the voltage sag becomes less, you can get more out of it. So wastage will go down. So that's why they can use same battery and give you 15% more shot. So that means like somebody thought about it. Somebody thought, hey, this puppy is draining battery. Yes, this puppy will consume battery like there is no tomorrow. But somebody thought of it. It's like, oh, yeah, battery is an issue. We can just say, hey, buy more or use USB-C power delivery, or we can design a power bank that allows both of the battery to actually yield more power, useful power. I'm like, how the heck somebody sat down in Sony and thought of it? How? And then it is 120 fps mode. Sounds awesome, but most people don't use it simply because it's so cumbersome to use. And in case of other scenarios, it's like just JPEG. And in case of Canon, where it's like 120 means 120, it's like you click it, it will say 120. It's like, bro, you don't have to let me click it. It's like 120 fps does not mean I have to click 120 cells. It could be like that speed. No, it's like no, you get full second, and by after that it will stop for buffer. It's like, what the hell. Here it's implemented far more smoothly, and it has one-click boost, meaning they understand it. Like if you have 120 fps, does not mean you're gonna go at 120 fps all the time. But what if you are shooting something at let's say 20 fps, and you just notice something interesting is about to happen, especially in sports. You're like, what if you had a nitro booster button? Just one-click boost. There is a button. There is a pre-defined setting to it. Click boost to 120 fps. Somebody thought of it. How? Like, did they collected Canon camera? Did they collected the users and be like, what is your problem with this puppy? Like, how the heck Sony came up with the idea? It's like, yeah, we always have the generally conservative settings, but sometimes we need an easy way to boost to that bonkers level. It's like, how the heck you sat down and figured that out? And it also has easy viewing. How Sony could do that? Where it's like, oh, you took 120 photos, that's a lot of photo, and if you have to scroll one by one, it's too time wasting. So if you have a normal photo and burst photo will be played as a video, and you can just watch the video and be like, oh, this click, the moment you click it, it opens up that image, you can star rate it. Somebody thought of it. It's like, oh, like just because you can shoot photo does not mean the problem is solved. It's like, how the heck you manage it? It's like, somebody thought of it. Star rating is there, easy viewing is there, one-shot boost is there. I'm like, damn. It's like somebody sat down and designed this. It's like, I'm gonna solve all the problems. It's like, that's why it's so amazing. And this, my soul is very happy from this. 4K, 120 FPS, no crop. I do know why these companies do this, but I hate it. Like, from bottom of my heart, it's like, dude, do not give me crop. Do not give, like, I paid through by selling my kidney to get this camera, which is a full frame camera. Why are you cropping it? It's like, hey, 4K 60 won't be that high quality. Give me low quality or give me option. It's like, hey, full frame or higher quality. Let me choose, because again, here's the deal. If I wanted like crop system, I would buy a crop sensor. I want full frame. I want my 28mm lens to behave like a 28mm lens. So that fact that they have learned, like somebody understood the feedback where it's like, bro, stop doing this BS, where it's like 4K 24 FPS full frame, 4K 30 FPS full frame, 4K 60 10% crop. It's like, what the hell? Why? 4K 120 20% crop. It's like, why? So this time they have 6K to 4K downsample in 24 FPS, 30 FPS, 60 FPS. At 120 it's line skipped, so still much better. Flat out, shut up, take money. Like, for many people, just shut up, take money, because again, you paid for full frame, you gonna get full frame. So I'm really happy. And again, they are saying first time in alpha. It's like, dude, you are creating garbage. It's not first time in alpha, first time in your company, where somebody is like, hey, we are selling full frame camera, let's not make it a crippled camera. And again, many people will compromise the fact that this is a global shutter, so that fundamentally means it has higher noise floor, like fundamentally or physics level. So they have a composite raw option also, meaning if you are shooting anything that is static, because of the ludicrous high speed, it can actually take multiple raws and allow you to compile all the raw files and make a high quality, almost no noise raw file. But it requires computer to be done, but it is there. It's like, that's why I was genuinely shocked. It's like somebody sat down and designed this. It's like, this camera does not feel rushed. This camera feels like somebody sat down. It's like, okay, 120 fps does not mean anything if it's not useful. Let's make it useful. Like raw files, of course, it will be compared to any other 24 megapixel made by the same company, like other Sony cameras, will be fundamentally worse. So what if we give an option where we have compiled multiple raw files and make it much better raw files? Somebody thought of it. Like blackout free. Again, many camera companies have reached this point where 30 fps, 60 fps on the EVF is blackout free. The moment you go higher than that, then they start to throttle. They're like, hey, what if that also is blackout free? So fundamentally, this is like a very highly polished, of course, let this be very clear, this is just the first impression, but surprisingly polished, whereas like somebody sat down and designed it. Very polished camera, which is shocking coming from Sony. So for whom this is? Well, here's the deal. This is not an everyday camera. Let this be flat out clear. This is not A7C. This is not a A7 Mark IV. This is a expensive puppy targeted for pro levels. It's like flat out. If you have to ask the price, you can't afford it. It's one of those things. And you will pay. Let this be very clear. You will pay early adopter tax. Red Komodo is $10,000 if I'm not mistaken, and that's just the body. By the time you actually make it useful, it will be like $20,000. So compared to that, this is free and this is larger sensor. So you have to understand, like, there is a penalty for global shutter. There is a penalty because it's not mass produced as a camera equipment. So somebody had to bite the bullet. So somebody also have to pay for the bullet. So Sony is trusting that enough of people will pay for this, that it will be justified. Now, assuming it sells well, which given the interest around it, I think they have already a winner in their hand, because this, after so many years of stagnation, this is like, whoa, like how smartphone were reaching a stagnation and then folding phone happened. Similar, like this is huge. So yes, there is an early adopter tax, let that be flat out clear. But if enough people are willing to pay, this technology will start to trickle down and it will become more refined, more better. Heck, somebody may figure out how to put the capacitor below. You never know. The moment that happens, that would be the day we'll stop talking about global shutter and every sensor will become global shutter. So you will pay for that global shutter early adopter tax. So that's why it's expensive. Now, for whom this is? Sports people, shut up, take money. Journalists, because again, they are more paid for the events they capture rather than the quality of photos. Shut up, take money. Fast videographers, why? Well, the same reason why Red Komodo sells a lot. Because again, if you are doing music video, it's handheld, you want that motion feeling. Yeah, you will go sick, specifically motion sickness, if you have it with a rolling shutter and if the speed is not fast enough. Now, can you have a good enough experience with a rolling shutter? Yeah, if it's like 5 milliseconds or less. But again, there is something else when you are talking about global shutter. It gives you that negative era feeling. Why? Again, every frame, and especially if you have sparkling lights, yeah, that's a shut up, take money. That's like the moment you have sparkling lights, shut up, take money, use global shutter. So for those sort of people, it's like shut up, take money, especially people dealing with flickering lights in sports arena, especially indoors. If they have a lot of lights and those lights are PWM controlled and not precisely, yeah, God help you, the flicker would be brutal. Concert goers, yeah, the lights have, again, for VFX reason, they have a lot of flickering in them. Your photos will be like, what the hell? So again, from their point of view, they have already booked it. Let that be very clear. They have already paid for it. They have already booked it. Now they are waiting. So it's not for common. And be mindful, let this be very clear. Majority of its function will be clamped downwards if you use third-party lens. So this is not a cheap camera, nor it's meant to be a cheap camera. It's a flagship, specifically paying the early adopter tax. So treat it as such. Now, can Sony pull this off? Realistically, well, this is the reason why they can pull it off. This is the selling of not the camera, of the sensor division. Sony sells bonkersly large amount of sensors. Majority of Android and iOS and dash cams and heck everything else uses Sony camera sensors, so to say. So Sony has the sensor horsepower where they can design a sensor that is like, bro, we good. Because be mindful, Canon did announce that they have a full frame camera that is basically sensor, full frame sensor that is global shutter, that is around 19 megapixel. So can Canon do it? Absolutely. Can On Semiconductor do it, which is the company responsible for making RE, Red, if I'm not Red and RE, they buy from On Semiconductor. So can Sony actually deliver this new technology? Yes. They have the scale power. They have the scale power. Like they have already, like for past 5 years, they have a medium format sensor that is made for like, global shutter. It's like, who uses that? In machine vision, when you have vibrating things which you have to scan, machine vision, shut up, take money. So this is a very new thing. Let this be very clear. And this is amazing, because if this happens, that means I can guarantee you in next 1 to 2 years, or maybe soon, Canon is just like, wow, this is our global shutter answer. And I'm pretty sure Nikon will be the last one, but let's see how things happen. But this is really good. In next 4 or 5 years, we can easily see this sort of technology trickling down, because I'm old enough where 10-minute full HD recording was like, whoa. Now I'm bitching that it only has 30 minutes. Again, that's not the problem of the camera, that's the problem of European Union, but they have solved it now. So this is a very new development after so long. Like, and the polish in the camera where somebody actually just like, oh, I want 30 FPS. No, how do you use that damn thing? I'm like, dang. So this was my presentation on the announcement of Sony's A9 Mark III. Hopefully you have liked it, learned from it. In that case, please click the like button, share it amongst your friends. That will help me a lot. If you didn't like it, didn't enjoy it, I urge you to press dislike, press it twice to show me extra disappointment. Please leave a comment because I do try to reply to all of them. Subscribe, press the bell icon if you're free. And as always, thanks for watching.